Hey everyone, it is time to do the next video lecture. Hope you're all hanging in there with this tough situation. I'm going to keep plugging away, keep making sure I try to stay on top of things. So let's get right into this lecture on public relations. Now, public relations is something I've had a little bit of experience with for the city of Harrisburg. Most of my experience has been in uh, journalism and TV news, as you know. Did have a little taste of public relations and utilizing the skills I have, so I have a little background with that. So let's get started. All right, what are public relations? Well, as you know, you're very familiar with celebrities, and politicians, and social media. Social media, they do allow celebrities and politicians to communicate directly with their audience. So it is very much used within the public relations field. So it's become a tool very much so within the PR field. They've had many tools over the years. People like Vin Diesel have become absolute stars within the social media universe. You can see that with the Fast and Furious movies. I'm not a big fan of that. There's a reason I don't have those in the list of movies. I'm trying to get you away from those. So to let you know there's other things out there, but public relations is doing a huge, been a huge deal for Vin Diesel and the marketing of that movie. And if you look at the other stars in that movie, quite a few of them have very high social media profiles, and that's helped the numbers of the sales because of their ability to promote themselves as the stars they are, and that has a lot to do with public relations. Now, what is public relations? And here's the official definition. Public relations refers to the total communication strategy conducted by a person, a government, or an organization attempting to reach and persuade an audience to adopt a point of view. That seems like a real important aspect to understand. Hint, hint, hint. If you're going to know about public relations, you should probably know the definition. All right, so it's their job to make people think in a positive way, or at least be able to minimize the damage of a negative event or something of that nature for a business, for a person. Depends on who the business or who the person is. Like I said, with a lot of this stuff I talk about, we can do great good, but it can also do great evil depending on who it is, what the message is being put out there, and what is the final result of their message and what comes of it. So there's good PR, there's bad PR, there's well done. When I mean good and bad, is when sometimes it's well executed, sometimes it's not so much, and then they have to clean up the mess again. All right, two major figures in public relations are P.T. Barnum and Buffalo Bill. P.T. Barnum, you may be familiar with that name, Barnum and Bailey Circus, very long time circus. He was, well, among other things, a circus promoter, and he was also in, he got started as a journalist. Didn't last that long because he had gross exaggerations and fraudulent stories. He wound up being a press agent. He that's where he got the thing "Greatest Show on Earth." It still lasted well until the closing of the circus very, very recently. And he had people like Jumbo the elephant, Dumbo from Disney. Well, that's where that originally came from. Tom Thumb, a smaller person who we call Tom Thumb. There's lots of he was known for his exaggerations of things to bring in people. It wasn't necessarily true, but they were advertised in that way. Why? Because he was trying to sell something. And then there was Buffalo Bill Cody, and he had his Wild West show and Congress of Rough Riders of the World. It was a traveling show, and they had all sorts of recreations of gunfights from the Civil War and battles of the Old West. And this was a way to entertain, but they was also a way to promote what they were doing. It became very popular for the time. Buffalo Bill Cody. One of his things was he was called Buffalo Bill because he killed out buffalo for the railroads. He was a person who he would hire agents, press agents, and they used the wide variety of media channels for the time. Remember, it's not like we have now, but whatever they did have back then, they used it to promote and became a very big deal in that time. It also shaped a lot of myths about rugged American individualism because of his story of how he came to be, coming from nothing. And he was also the first person to use what is called publicity. And you hear publicity, oh, you kind of know what it is, but you want to probably know what the definition is. And that definition is, and this seems kind of important, a type of PR communication that uses various media messages to spread information about a person, a corporation, an issue, or a policy to elevate entertainment culture to an international level. And he was able to do that because it did get beyond just the United States. So yes, P.T. Barnum, Buffalo Bill, Cody, two very big historical people, and this was a very big deal for back then because he wouldn't have been as nearly as big if he didn't get that publicity out. Now, when you think about what first PR people were, the first PR people, if you think about it, were theatrical press agents. Basically, they wanted to take a client and get media exposure, and basically what they would do is they have stunts, and they would stage those stunts to get that the exposure. And one of the people that they did that were Daniel Boone. He wound up later, and Davy Crockett. So these were people who had press agents, and their names became very popular in historic ends and days. Which then we come to big business and press agents. Now, basically, for a while there, the companies, we were making a lot of money with the Industrial Revolution. They didn't care so much at first about what people thought. They just wanted to make their money. They didn't understand that the importance of a good corporate image had potential to make more money for them. And you can see that in the 1800s, these companies started hiring these agents, these press agents, and among the first one were the railroads. You think about the 1850s, they wanted to expand, and one of the first things they did was in the 1850s, what they said was to ease the tensions between the North and the South, to promote expansion down there. Apparently that didn't work very well since the Civil War. We all know what happened there. But this is where we first see a major company, and that was the railroads, utilize public relations. You'll find that other companies, utility companies, did it because they wanted to hurt the competition. This is how lots of some monopolies started popping up, because they would use the PR firms or the PR people or the press agents, what have you, to downplay and denigrate their competition, so they would have the top status. Also, part of the problem, what they would do is they would use bribery, fraud, to get support and eliminate the competition, sometimes with government, sometimes with media outlets. So this was a problem. Now there's you think about the real birth of what you think about modern public relations that started around 20th century. And there's two such people, Ivy Ledbetter Lee and Edward Bernays. They both, first Ivy Ledbetter Lee, he did understand the importance of public sentiment. Uh, Among the things that he is is uh, is known for was one of them was the Ludlow mine strike. There was a strike at a mine, and and then there was some people coming in to break the strike. And what wound up happening was there were a lot of deaths that included women and children. And within the strategy of what Ivy Ledbetter Lee did, he said, "Well, there some sort of fire popped up, and these women and children that were there, they knocked over." And in his explanation, which people doubt, said, they call in a way partly caused their own death. So this was to help that specific mining company. Um, but one of the things he also did was he was prominent in hardly telling companies to use honesty in some instances, to instead of maybe deny certain things, to turn it around, or to try to minimize the damage in a way, to because the other previous people before them would always say deny, deny, deny. That didn't always work. So he was a former reporter, and in 1906 he went to work for the railroad, and there wound up being a railroad accident there, and they hired him because they wanted to downplay the negative uh, repercussions that they were to get from the public. So they told him, all right, you have to embrace this, be honest about it. And people like John D. Rockefeller, if that sounds pretty familiar, major oil magnate. But he wound up having some issues and problems as well. We talked about the muckrakers, and one in particular, McClure's magazine. Well, he had to help out. Mr. Lee had to help out with the PR for that, and Mr. Rockefeller, and so he basically put him in um, overalls and made him look like a down to earth working man kind of thing, and it worked, I guess, for the time. I don't know if it still works to this day, but it worked then. So yeah, Ivy Ledbetter Lee was known for being one of the first PR people out there, um, more press agent, and so, but he was still considering a founding father of what public relations is, dealing with a lot of transportation companies as well. All right, so then that brings us to Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays is the nephew of Sigmund Freud. You're familiar with that name, a longtime psychological psychiatrist and icon in that realm. Basically, he wound up working for lots of different companies, including General Electric, tobacco companies, General Motors, Good Housekeeping and Time Magazine, Procter and Gamble. Hey, look, RCA. Oh, so he used to work for David Sarnoff. Hey, look, David Sarnoff. Once again, pops his head up again in public relations. I guess he would need some help with public relations to be able to be in the position he was for so long. India, the city of Vienna. He worked for Calvin Coolidge, former president. So he worked for a lot of different companies, and he's known for developing propaganda. This is not something I'll be honest with you. This is not something I'm a big fan of. I am from the media side of it, so We have very much a rivalry. We're always trying to get the truth. They're always trying to put out the best message. So lots of times we kind of clash. So this is going to be a difficult chapter for me to talk about, but I got to do my job. I'll do the best I can. But this is where we see mentality of we saw Bernays portrayed President Wilson as a peacemaker during the end of World War One. He was also the first person to have a class called Public Relations at NYU in 1923. He called public relations as the attempt by information, persuasion, and adjustment to engineer public support for any activity, cause, movement, or institution. This is, that's something if you can do great good or you can do great evil. Being able to sway minds is a very powerful ability, and this is something I've been telling you since day one. So this should not be shocking to hear that from me. Like to say I do have an issue with that. I really feel people should be able to make that decision for themselves and not be swayed one way or another. But that's their job to minimize damage and try to promote some things. And I think it's more what the company, organization, or the person is, because all companies and all organizations need some sort of public relations. So, I think it's a matter of what the message is and what's being done. It's because you can do great good with it. It just depends on what you're doing. Now, one of the big things that Edward Bernays was prominent for accomplishing was he was hired by the American Tobacco Company. He made it popular and socially acceptable for women to smoke. Prior to that, it wasn't considered appropriate for women to smoke. Now, if you think about that, it's from from a sense of equality and freedom. Of course, men and women should be absolutely equal. But from another standpoint, you think, it's for the American Tobacco Company, and most of them are men, so they want a whole other set of customers. So that's probably why they wanted to do that. And they considered he called the cigarettes torches of freedom. But if you think about it this way, how many women would have not died because of that? It's their choice. It is freedom of choice to do that. But there's also people who might say, what would happen to if all those women who didn't start smoking because of that? How many people wouldn't have had health problems or died or had cancer because of that? You can see it in a couple different ways. But he portrayed it in a way of freedom. Women should have the same rights to do that as men and should be just as socially acceptable. Some things that he wrote and said, there's some things, and I'm not going to lie to you, I do have some issues with what is said, and I'll quote what it is said in the book. The duty of the higher strata of society, the cultivated, the learned, the expert, the intellectual is therefore clear. They must inject moral and spiritual motives into public opinion. I have a real problem with that, but that's the mentality of Edward Bernays. I hope, if anything, if you get what you get out of this lecture is, hey, maybe things aren't as they always seem. I warn about it all the time, and most people think I'm crazy when I say these things. But what we do is very important and very powerful, and I'm not going to lie, I have a real problem with that mentality. I think a person should do it on their own and be given the truth. There's a lot to be said. So if you haven't learned anything else, maybe this will open up your eyes of a lot of mentalities. Not just him, but it's the entire industry and the way entire people think that are in that level or in that industry, or even when you get higher and higher within the government and other high corporate aspects of society. So it's kind of just to kind of get you start to think, hey, maybe things aren't always as they seem. So that's all I'm saying. All right. Now, the practice of public relations. There are more than 7,000 firms in the U.S. And since the 80s, it has, and some of you here are within that major and within that track, and so it's growing and growing. There is the Public Relations Society of America. It does have over 11,000 members, has over 300 chapters at colleges and universities, the PRSA. So it is a very growing field that has grown in leaps and bounds over the years. Now, one of the main movements and philosophies of the PRSA is public relations helps an organization and its public adapt mutually to each other, and it can very much so. We still need public relations. Lots of companies still need what's going on out there, how they can connect to the public, and it's all an important aspect of their business and how they relate to the public. And then in turn, they can, and besides their business or whatever their service or whatever they're doing, how they relate within the company and how they become part of that community. And public relations is part of that. They want people to know what they're doing and that they're there, and sometimes they want to be part of that community and interact with the community, almost a family type, community-esque feeling. Now, there's a couple of different approaches, and there's been some popular public relations agencies, Burson Marsteller and Hill and Knowlton. They would have major in-house staffs, and they are used by many companies and organizations. And if you look on page 393, you see a whole load of some of the top agencies going back a few years, firms in the world, and you're talking about lots and lots of money. I mean, Edelman was the top one for that year, and it is its own firm. It's headquartered in Chicago, made out $847 million. So this is lots of money going on around. It's $27 billion industry. Hundreds of offices with some of the biggest companies, PR companies in the world. Now, public relations is a little different from advertising. Basically, advertising is dealing with a certain product or a certain company, more a certain company product being out or a certain company, and promoting that company for their specific products or services. Public relations is more dealing with an overall feeling of that company, of things that might happen with that company, promoting. Yeah, sometimes they'll have events that promote releases of certain things, but it doesn't deal with the specific commercials themselves. So, though it's similar to advertising, it is not exactly alike. Especially when you're talking about PR. PR deals with a lot of different things, including publicity, communication, public affairs, dealing with the government, making sure financial public relations are good, community relations, social networking. So there's lots of jobs that the public relations departments deal with. All right, there's a couple of different things you should probably know. How to formulate the message and convey the message. These are two important aspects of what public relations does. Part of formulating the message, they have to know this through research. All right, they're not really sure how well certain campaigns work, so they have to throw stuff out there to see what people are thinking. They could be doing these campaigns and they might not get any feedback about them. If they do, if so, they do, and unless it was really bad, and people start complaining because most people don't really realize. They don't understand. They don't realize, so they just have to throw stuff out there and do research. And part of that research is through surveys, through focus groups, and now with social media, there's so many different things they can just throw out there, and people don't even know they're necessarily might be taking part in some public relations um, research operation, because how many things do you pop up in your social media all the time? People just go on it, and they can design in a way just to get information. So they have to find out what works, what doesn't work, to help them formulate formulate the message. How do they form that message next time? What works, what doesn't work, and that's what that research is important. And that research helps them create those messages. It also helps them find new clients, because then they have actual hard research to show them when they're trying to bring in possible new clients about, oh, well, we should, going by this research, we find this much, and this is how this could help your group or your person or whoever it might be. And then another important aspect is conveying the message. How are you getting those messages out there? Press releases, that's the most basic. They are used all the time. They will always be used. It could be simply a press release letter put out there, and just people use that. It's very basic, and it's something I'm sure some people in this room have started to learn how to write a press release. By the time you're done, you will know how to do a decent enough press release and to get a job. So that's the main first one. Basically just an announcement, kind of like news, but not quite, because you're promoting whatever that company or whatever they're doing is. So there's a little bit of journalism of training needed for that, because a lot of times it's a press release, so you're dealing with the press, so you want to have some sort of organization for that. Video news releases, I've dealt with many of those in my time. Used to get them all the time, and usually they're not very long. Sometimes they actually look like little news packages, like I'm used to doing, but you can definitely see their promotional types of videos to promote their company or whatever the thing it is that's being promoted. And then they are released constantly. So it does help. From a standpoint of the media companies do like that, from a standpoint that they're getting video from a source, and they don't have to put somebody out there, and they're getting video, and they like it because they don't have to supply the shooter or the editor or anything like that. Now, they may not necessarily use that VNR in the way that the company's hoping they use it. They might use it for just B-roll or sound bites or something like that, but it gives them actual video that they're allowed to use, because it is a video news release. The company wants you to use it, and it gives them more content to use. So if they need some video for that company, they don't have to worry about shooting it. So, but most of the time we don't use it in the way they expect us to use it. We use it for our own reasons and for our own things, and won't necessarily use exactly every message they put in there on that. And now you've got so many online options with social media these days. They're just constantly popping up, and it was a whole new ball game when the internet and especially social media popped up. It's just exploded, a whole other universe specifically designed for online options. And then you also have things such as public service announcements, that also deal with that. They have talked about those. The public service announcements are more for commercials to promote certain things from it could be safety, or it could be maybe they're aligned with some campaign that goes more towards the public good. But that's another aspect that they use too. So what are we looking at here? We are looking at kind of how it's organized and what they're doing there, like media relations. This is where you're dealing specifically with the media itself. It's a whole other side of public relations. Because you're dealing with the public, but the media is a little different. Like I said, there's always been kind of a adversarial relationship between the two, and that's why a lot of people who are in the media will sometimes get jobs in media relations, because they know exactly what the job is as the journalist, what questions they're going to ask, how they're going to attack it, how that station's going to look at it, and what strategy they're going to use. So you'll find a lot of people who worked in television, especially from a standpoint of in front of the camera. I've noticed a lot of people in front of the camera sometimes go into media relations. They might not be the biggest names that you may have heard of, but they've had some on-air experience in the past, and that experience and that notoriety will sometimes make inspire a PR firm to hire them, because they've got that name, and people might know that. I've worked with a few people who've been on air and done that, but it's a way to deal with the media in a way, to communicate in a way they know best works with the media, with the media relations people. Now, sometimes they have special events that go on for their company or for their organization or for their client, and it's usually for publicity. It could be release of something, or a new product, or a new movie if it's an actor, or if it's a new whatever. So they'll go through all the planning of that to promote a product or whatever the person. That's one of the things jobs do, and that's to to raise the client's profile. Sometimes what they call a pseudo event, and the pseudo meaning almost like fake. Why it was created for the whole point of gaining coverage in the media. It might not have been that big a actual deal, but they've promoted to such a point. Hey, we got to send them out. We got to send someone out to get this. Other times they'll promote the heck out of it. So hey, media, maybe we should get some coverage of that. So that's why it's called a pseudo event. And this is also where you start seeing going on the media and talk shows, and radio shows, and TV talk shows to go and promote certain things. That's why you see them making the rounds. It could be books, it could be movies, it could be any number of things, it could be products. That's where you find that. There's also a couple of different aspects of public relations, community relations, people who specifically deal with in creating events to work within the community. This is where you get lots of swag. It could be like drink cozies or hats, or if the company has a like a spot some cuddly mascot. This is where you'll see that being handed out, because they understand the importance of community involvement. If your company is in there, this is talking about companies in general, that you are part of that community thread, and part of being that community thread is sometimes sponsoring events in the area for that local community, because you want to become part of ingrained into the culture of that community. It's important to put that out there, so you have a good relationship with them, so they think highly of you. So you'll see, that's why you'll see lots of things sponsored. It could be chicken barbecues, or concerts or community theater or stuff like that. Why they also do sponsorships, local orchestras and community orchestras and stuff. So that's why they do that kind of stuff. That's part of it. And then events that could be going on as well, parades, picnics, 4th of July celebrations. That's where community relations comes into account. Then you also have consumer relations. This is where you are told, hey, you have to pay more attention to the people that are buying the things that you're buying. We have to make sure they're happy with what we do, because not everything we put out is always a wonderful product. So it's our job to make sure people like that better, or we can at least soften the blow of maybe it's not such a great product. And this is also where you find out you want to make sure people feel comfortable with your product or your service, and there's certain safety guarantees there, and also to make sure that every time someone calls, every time someone emails or texts or whatever the form of communication coming in from the outside world is being answered quickly, because if you're not, and you don't, because you need to hire those people, because if it just piles up, then people get annoyed and they start thinking badly. So you have to have those people skills to be able to deal with those people who are buying your product or service. You want to keep them happy, and sometimes people will contact you, and you have to be able to put the best foot forward as part of that. All right, some other things that they do with government relations. Sometimes they do things to make sure certain regulations that might hurt a certain company. They try to get some influence there. And this is an issue I have. I mean, some of you might also have, but it is part of the public relations industry, is lobbying. This is where we hear about lobbyists from certain companies trying to talk to legislators or people who are close to legislators to change a certain policy that might help that company or that organization. All depends on what you're talking about. There's been lots of questions recently from a political standpoint that the lobbyists have to get out of politics. That's why we have a lot of the problems we have. But then you'll see those who do, quote unquote, play ball. They'll get lots of support and also somehow find more money in their campaign coffers. So, I mean, there's lots of aspects that are kind of shady with this. I mean, it kind of depends on the organization. Once again, depends on the organization, depends on on who it is, what they're lobbying. But lobbying has become a big part of public relations, because it's part of what they do. They're trying to do the best they can for that specific company, because they want the company to either succeed more or in some cases not die. Sometimes certain things could adversely affect a company that badly. So, and then there's stuff such as things called astroturf lobbying. Sometimes public relation firms they'll create what are seem to be grassroots campaigns, but they're really not. They're campaigns sponsored by these firms to help out their client in a way, but it looks like, it's just this community uproar, and it really wasn't a community uproar. It was just some PR firm that created it for the company that they work for. So we have to be careful with that. There's a lot of that going on these days. There's some people out there that are said to have control over some very well-known groups out there that have other motivations, and they're behind the scenes. So this is what I'm always talking about: being careful, listening, trying to filter out things and messages, because so much is coming at you, and who's making the message, and who the people who are pretending or who claim they are sometimes aren't, and they have other motivations. But this is part of the whole public relations um, side of the industry. This is part of what they some people do. We look at some, just to get an idea, between 2000 and 2015, lots of spending here. You've got the number of lobbyists and then how much spending is done. And between 2000 to 2015, it's dramatically increased. Now, the number of lobbyists has gone down, but the amount of money has more than doubled. All right, so that kind of tells you. So yeah, like 2000 there, 12,000 lobbyists and 1.57 billion. But now we go down 2015. You've got less, but oh look, 3.22 billion. So that kind of shows you how the lobbyists have gained influence. And see, that's something else you kind of have to think about too when you're creating messages, and heck, even voting. What are these messages going out? Why are they going out? Part of it is because of lobbyists and the power that they have, and it's important. I mean, this is part of learning and becoming educated, and becoming part of this industry, and understanding the inner workings and messaging and messages and how powerful we are. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just trying to tell you how it is. And, you have to be careful. You need to be careful out there. Don't think, because it's so easy to not think. Because a lot of people don't want you to think. It makes their lives harder. All right. Now, since the public relations came into the web has done a lot, and public relations has been part of that. You're seeing lots of company websites. They become home bases for these PR efforts. Lots of different. You got your website. Oh, they've got tons and tons of PR stuff on there to put the company out there. It's the best place possible. Whole new venue. So when you come there, boom! Oh, we're the greatest. We are said company. We are great. This is what we do. And I'll list all the things that they're involved with, and you'll see the company and people from the company and videos and hugging children, or what it might be. Oh, we are very concerned about said thing, and then you'll see an image for that, and then, I mean, it becomes its own personal, whole personal like broadcast or own media outlet for themselves to promote whatever their company is. This also helps from interacting with the media. With communication, it's at a moment's notice, so they've had to adapt and then control. They need, the whole part of PR is they need to control the messages, and sometimes what they do is they pay people. All right. Sometimes that's why I say stay away from Wikipedia, because sometimes you might not be getting wonderful information. Sometimes they hire people to do that, and then also they'll have bloggers sometimes promote products and say, "Oh, I'm a reviewer of this," but they've been paid to specifically promote whatever that product is. So you got to be careful with when you're looking for certain products. I checked out the blogger. I always go to that person. You have to be careful, because sometimes they're not just someone who's really into it that wants to do things like that. Sometimes they're actually paid by a PR firm for a company to make sure people, I'm getting great reviews, and they're getting great reviews because they're paying for the great reviews. So that's another aspect you have to deal with. A couple of instances in the history of public relations when it comes to a couple of very big news stories. One was Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1989. I remember that. I was in high school. That was my senior year. That was my senior year. That was a terrible oil spill, but the big difference between that and the BP oil spill, from what you might not forget so much because it was April 2010, so it was about 10 years ago. You might have still been young, but you might have known about it. The big thing is Exxon Valdez, Exxon was very forthcoming. They were very apologetic. They tried to work real hard on making sure that they were making amends and cleanup was happening, and they were very humble about it. And they understood the brevity of the situation, and they knew it was bad, and their public relations got ahead of it, and they took the right steps. And Exxon was able to recover from that. BP, on the other hand, did not. They did a terrible job. They were not nearly as empathetic as they should have been, especially the CEO. He came off as rather callous, and you couldn't really come back from that. They're still around, but it's been taking a long time for them to come back from that. And then also in 1982, there was a Tylenol scare. I remember this. I was like 11 years old, 10 years old. I was born in November, so I was probably about 10 when it first happened. As soon as they found out, there was people who put lacing it with cyanide. Yeah, that was some people got sick, and some people died. They were quick on top of that. They were like, "Oh, we messed up. We didn't know what happened. We're gonna go out there." They took them all off. They created more secure bottles. They were right on top of that. So you see in times of crisis the difference between the two, between good and bad. Now, here we go to what I'm kind of used to. There's definitely tension between us, the press, and the public relations. A lot of it is because, like I said, the press wants to get at the complete story, the truth, what's going on. They don't want painted pictures for them. They just want, through their own research. And if you're a good journalist, you do it through your own research and what you can find and what you can prove and what and to build that story. But then on the other side, you have public relations that wants to sometimes see a certain reality or see a certain thing. So we can see where they can be knocking heads. Lots of times, you'll have sometimes you'll get issues with public relations agents and dealing with the media, and sometimes it's also the fact that sometimes with public relations of businesses, they're doing publicity, and they want you to, we expect you to be at every event, and this is big news, and the news is like, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and depending on any given day, we may or may not be able to attend that event. And sometimes it rubs the public relations the wrong way, but because they might even be a big factor within the community, and a big presence. So it all depends. It depends, but there's always been lots of tension between the two because of what one does and what the other does, and it's always kind of butted heads for a long time. Now, there's the PRSA. This is trying to make sure the image of public relations is okay, and they want so they have a set of ideals and a set of codes that they want the public relations industry to follow through. That is a watchdog group, and this is also, you need to be accredited as agents within firms. Like I said, they have a code of ethics and making sure people stand by these ethics and do these morally and professional codes, live up to them. And some of the professional values are advocacy, honesty, expertise, independence, loyalty, and fairness. All these things. This is what the PSRA, if you become public relations and you get deep into the industry, these are the things that are expected of you within that industry. Sometimes it can be difficult, depending on who your client is or who your business is or whatever. But if you follow these, you probably do a lot better job and do a better job for yourself and for that company or client or whatever the case may be. Alternative voices. Basically, you're going to find that what goes on in PR, you don't hear about it too often. Lots of times we do work very close with it. So that's, so that you're not necessarily going to hear about the inner workings of public relations. Heck, TV and media and other news outlets have have PR firms and media firms and PR firms too. So who are they to talk? But also, and they work pretty closely together. Sometimes things they kind of just go to the side. There are some books out there that you can check out. Best War Ever, Toxic Sludge is Good for You, Mad Cow USA, all things kind of telling you how they've worked in different instances over the course of years for different industries and what their strategies were, what the results were. So those are some of the bigger things that are out there about public relations. Well, and the simple truth is that certain politicians do hire PR firms. They improve their images. Those campaigns result in the free media exposure, but it does raise questions. Democracy, expression of ideas, and as journalists, we need to become less willing to be conduits. We have to pay attention, making sure this isn't it's on us. We have to have that critical thinking ability. That's the important aspect of being a journalist. You have to be good with critical thinking, and not be taken advantage of and being duped into thinking, oh, this is not really a news story, but it's more a PR stunt. So, public relations has been around a long time. Will continue to be around a long time, and it's definitely a track that many people follow, and is needed for any number of organizations and companies and people out there that deal with the general public. All right, and okay, that's all I got for you today. Thanks.